My name is Kate O'Dwyer Randall, and I'm the acting chaplain to the University of Richmond. Welcome this evening to the Cannon Memorial Chapel for our 2008 Sylvester Lecture, an evening with author Anne Lamott. We are so glad that you are here. It promises to be an enchanted evening. Before I introduce Carly Sylvester, a second-year student from Mariga, California, to the podium to introduce Anne, I'd like to take just a few moments of your time to acknowledge our generous sponsors and to make a quick few announcements. Number one, we do ask that you please refrain from taking flash photographs during tonight's lecture. Second, we ask that everyone take a moment and be sure that your cell phones are off. And third, we ask that after Anne speaks tonight, there's going to be a question and answer session. And after that, we ask that everyone remain seated while we escort Anne to the bookstore for a book signing. And we're going to ask folks to kind of stay here while she gets a head start. A quick word about the Sylvester Lecture. The Sylvester Lecture is an annual event of the Office of the Chaplaincy, and it is made possible through the generous support of David and Terry Hyman Sylvester. The intent of this lectureship is to bring the most relevant, provocative, inspiring, spiritual teachers of our day to this community. What an amazing gift to bestow on a university chaplaincy. Many members of the Sylvester family are here with us tonight, and I just wanted to ask you all to join me in thanking them for their generosity and for their vision. We are also fortunate to have several university sponsors who have also made this evening possible. Among them, Richmond Quest, the Department of Religion, Women in Living and Learning, and the Booker Chair of Religion. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our sponsors. Most Anne Lamott fans that I talk to have a remarkably similar story about what her writing has meant to their lives. Simply put, there seems to be a moment one experiences when reading her work, where a sentence, a turn of phrase, or a poetic quip grabs hold of our hearts and wrestles our every defense to the floor. Without even knowing quite how, her words make us fall in love with our own fragile human hearts, with God, with total strangers, and with even our most bitter enemy. When she tells us that we serve a God who has enough grace to go round, no matter what we've done or what we failed to do, we believe her. I first fell in love with Anne Lamott in her chapter entitled Why I Make Sam Go to Church in her book, Traveling Mercies. This is now a chapter that I require for every family who asks me to baptize their child. In it, she writes the following: Why I make Sam go to church? I make him because I can. I outweigh him by 75 pounds. But that is only part of it. The main reason is that I want to give him what I have found in the world, which is a path and a little light to see by. A path and a little light to see by. Those are the answers to prayer for the faithful sojourner. Welcome. We are surely in for an enchanted evening.
Articulating one's faith in a world where morals, ethics, and principles are no longer clearly defined or evident is a challenge. Living as an example is even more so. Anne Lamott manages to do both. in a way that challenges our perspectives, rattles our preconceived notions, and tickles our fancies. By taking the ordinary and weaving it into the fabric of the very essence of humanity, she shines an extraordinary light on the power of a steadfast faith in an everyday life. Using all of her life experiences, she writes with self-effacing humor and ruthless honesty. She combines wit with introspection while inspiring her readers to find the significance in the insignificant. Anne Lamott has been quoted as saying, "I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith, and I struggle to communicate that." Not only does she communicate her faith through her writings and lectures, she embodies the very essence of hope, optimism, and the potential of the human spirit. Her non-traditional approach to faith is inspiring and refreshing. Ms. Lamott is the author of 6 novels, as well as 4 best-selling nonfiction books. She has been honored with the Guggenheim Fellowship, has lectured at UC Davis, and teaches writing conferences across the country. The Denver Post says this about her: "Reading Lamott is like having a chat with one of the angels, although a smarter, wittier one." I'm honored to present this year's Sylvester Lecture keynote speaker, author Anne Lamott.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you, very much. It's great to be here. It's wonderful to be here. Let us pray. No, I was kidding. Let us breathe. I'm going to read you a story from Grace eventually, because it helps me get grounded and remember what it is I love so much to write and think and remember. And then I'm just going to tell you everything I can think of that might be helpful to you about writing or faith or really anything that would spring from being a person with just enough faith to practice being human and practice being a little juicier here and there, practice being a little bit more expansive here and there. But first I want to say thanks. Elaine Dempsey's family is here somewhere, and I heard you got in, and I want to welcome you. It's from a woman, the relatives of a friend of mine from church who's just been unbelievably generous to me and to Sam both. Can you hear me back okay? Yeah, okay, good. I usually like to make fun of the people in the back for being late and getting bad seats and hoping they'll change their ways, and then they would be right up here, but I won't tonight. And I want to welcome my really darling publicist's parents, Craig Burke's parents. Is that you? Oh, you're so adorable. You are so pretty. He's like the handsomest man in New York City and just as dear as can be. So I'm glad you got here. Let's see. All right. And then we're going to sit down and do questions afterwards. And then I'm going to sign books in the bookstore later. And I'm happy to sign anything, as many books as you have, old books, books you've ruined. I signed 2 badly dog-damaged books in Pittsburgh. A woman actually had 2 different books of mine that had been destroyed by her dog. And it's just too nice to comment on that at all, but I signed them. The thing is that I'm not going to personalize your books, and I'm sorry, but there are a lot of you, and my hand is old, and it will hurt like crazy tomorrow. And but I'm very happy to sign them. It's really easy for me to sign my own name. You don't even think about it, because you're writing checks. You know what to do. You just no, I can do it all night. Jimmy Carter can sign his name 2,000 times in an hour. Of course, he's not here. And you have me, and my father had this sort of up and down Presbyterian writing, and that's where I learned what I wanted my own signature to look like when you become of an age, I guess just before you get your driver's license when you need to have a standardized signature. So anyway, so it takes a while. I'm really happy to say hi if you don't have books, just whatever you need. You can write anything you want on the books, and I will sign that. Okay, so I'm going to read you a piece from Grace Eventually is the third collection of these little pieces I wrote for Salon, sometimes for the LA Times, sometimes just speeches when I was asked to give a speech. And they're short. They're all about 6 or 7 pages. And I think if you have read the other two, you will notice the first batch was called Traveling Mercies, and it came out when Clinton was president, and I was just in a much better frame of mind. And then Plan B came out, and by then things had really gone south for me. And I have to say, it's a pretty angry book. It's pretty angry. And I think Grace Eventually is less angry, although here and there, maybe the tiniest aside. But I don't think it's full of rage like Plan B is. I also wrote a very angry writing book once called Bird by Bird when the first Mr. Bush was president. And then I wrote a really angry baby book. I believe Mr. Bush was president then too. So you can sort of chart my chart who's in the White House by the tone of the book. So, okay, well, let me read you this piece I really like called Ski Patrol. Not too long ago, am I doing this really well, Kate, would you say? Okay, and you're still hearing it in the back, the late people, all fine? Okay. Okay. Not too long ago, I was skiing in the mountains where my son Sam and I spend a weekend most winters. Nowadays, he instantly disappears with the hordes of snowboarders. I believe he is somewhat embarrassed to be seen with me. Once, standing next to him and his friend at the bottom of a hill, I fell over for no reason. And in fact, the very first time we went skiing together, I skied in a strangely slow, inexorable path for 100 feet or so, straight into a huge net at the bottom of the slopes, erected to protect the small ski bear children from being crushed by people like me. Then I got tangled up in it like a fish. After Sam disappears, I usually take the chairlift to the top of the pony slope for a couple of runs, which really anyone can manage. And I triumph. I roar down the slight incline, pretending to be an Olympic skier. Filled with confidence, I try the easiest intermediate slope, where I mostly fall or slide down on my butt for the first run, and then have a few extended runs of 4 or 5 minutes where I'm actually skiing. By my second run down an intermediate slope, I am on my feet almost the whole time, skiing triumphantly for America. But this time, as the chairlift carried me to the top of the intermediate slope, which I had just skied down, I experienced a moment's confusion, born of hormones, high altitude, and a light snow falling. I suddenly could not remember whether the stop we were approaching was the same one I had just skied down from. The chair slowed and lowered for us to disembark, and my seatmate got off and zipped away like a swallow, while I sat there torn between wanting to get off and thinking that maybe mine was the next stop. The chair jerked forward and resumed its ascent. I looked around for landmarks but saw only brightly colored skiers in clusters, and I was pretty sure that this was not the right stop. Until a second later, when I realized I was mistaken, it was the right stop. By then, though, the chair was 4 or 5 feet off the ground and rising, but I did not let this stop me. I took a long, deep breath, wriggled to the edge of the chair, and flung myself off into the snow. Flung myself the way stuntmen fling themselves onto the back of speeding trains, or a clown flings himself from a bucking bronco, mugging bug-eyed for the crowd. I estimate that I was 5 or 6 feet off the ground for the timeless instant of eternity before I crashed down into the snow. I landed hard, proving the theory of gravity once again. I was somehow still on my skis for a moment until I fell over. I do not imagine anyone had seen anything like this before. Someone hurtling into outer space with such force from such a low starting point. I felt like Icarus near death in the snow, with melting skis instead of wings. I was immediately aware of 2 things: that I was not badly hurt, and that most people were pretending not to have noticed. Out of kindness or horror or just sheer mortification. I am ever my mother's daughter, and so my first impulse was to smile with confidence to the few who were watching. Wave like a politician campaigning from the rarely used horizontal position. "I'm okay," I said to 2 pretty women who came over and offered to pull me up. I continued to wave nonchalantly, as if this sort of silly thing happened to me all the time. I told them I just needed to catch my breath. They made sympathetic cooing sounds and skied away. I sat up and leaned back on my hands in the snow. By the time I finally stood up, my hands were frozen. I was winded, ashamed, confused, and bruised, grateful only that Sam hadn't seen me. He would have died. He would have stabbed himself repeatedly in the head with his ski pole. Just when I thought things couldn't get much worse, nausea struck, wave after wave, like morning sickness. And I thought, I'm going to throw up in the snow. Ladies and gentlemen, for my next trick, I pretended to pinch my nostrils against the cold, but was actually pressing my hand to my mouth to hold back the tide. My head spun and I prayed, "Help me, Jesus, help me," the way a very old woman at my church named Mary Williams used to pray at her most afraid and delirious, right in the middle of anything, sermons, songs, silence. "I know my change is going to come," she'd cry out, "but touch me now, Lord." I don't know how long I stood there with my hand clamped to my mouth, only my poles and a frayed consignment store faith to support me. All I knew was that help is always on the way, 100% of the time. Rumi said, "Someone fills the cup in front of us." I know that when I call out, God will be near and hear and help eventually. Of course, it is the eventually that throws one into despair. For instance, even now, I know America will be restored again eventually, although it is hard to envision this at the moment. But it will. God always hears our cries and helps, and it's always a surprise to see what form God will take on earth. In the old joke, a man whose plane crashed in the tundra bitterly tells a bartender that God forsook him, that he waited in vain for divine intervention and would have died in the snow if it hadn't been for some stupid Eskimos who came along. So maybe a tall, strong man with a medical toboggan would be by soon. Or the 2 pretty women who'd wanted to help. Or Jesus in earmuffs. Instead, a short, plump woman pulled up on skis a few minutes later. She was wearing an orange cap and an official jacket from the ski resort. "I think I'm going to throw up," I warned her so she wouldn't get too close. Well, then let's just stand here a moment, she said. She had acne and chapped cheeks and small brown eyes. I think I might need some help, I said, which is something I force myself to say every few years. Boy, you landed so hard, she said. I saw you from up above. Oh, great. I shook my head, bewildered, on the verge of tears. Are you on the ski patrol, I asked. Sort of. I'm here to help in non-emergency situations like this. Why don't you come with me? She stepped out of her skis and stood on my binding so that I could step out of mine. We picked up our skis and I trudged after her through the snow. We went to a wooden 10-by-10 shack away from the lift and went inside. It held 2 long benches, a folding chair, and shelves laden with first aid equipment, bottles of water, used coffee cups, a walkie-talkie, and it was warm from a kerosene heater. There were 2 shabby windows through which you could see snowy pine trees outside. The woman poured me a miniature Dixie cup of water, but my face was so cold that I couldn't get my lips to work, and I dribbled water down my front like an aged, numbed-up person at the dentist. She took the cup away. Let's take off your gloves first, she said, and pulled them off gently as if they were mittens connected inside my jacket sleeves with a string. She laid my gloves on the chair near the heater and pulled off her own. Mine are nice and toasty, she said. You can wear them for a while until yours warm up. I'll be back soon. There are only a couple of us working this spot today. She went outside. After a while, I stretched out on one of the benches and closed my eyes. The kerosene smelled like lacquer, and I kept feeling waves of nausea. My bones were cold. I could isolate the icy scent of pine trees that sneaked through the walls. Sometimes grace is a ribbon of mountain air that gets in through the cracks. I practiced concentrating between each wave of nausea the way I did when I was in labor, savoring ice chips and apple juice between contractions. Miles from home, holed up deeply alone in a smelly hut, I had that old familiar feeling of separation from myself, from God, and from the happy, pretty people outside. I thought of the woman from the ski patrol with her small brown eyes. She looked like the monk seals that swim ashore in Hawaii to rest on the sand. The adult seals are 6 and 7 feet long, and they all look like Charles Lawton. The newest tourists on the beach think they are dying and need to be rescued, but anyone who has been there even a day knows that they come on shore to rest. Pool workers from the beachside resorts always arrive with yellow safety tape and traffic cones to rope off a space for the seals to rest in. The first time I came upon one in the sand, I thought it was trying to make eye contact with me, that I was its last best hope of being saved. It had sand around its eyes and lots of shark scars. My guy Rory, who surfs in Hawaii every year, laughed and explained that the seals are perfectly fine, and when they are rested, they waddle back to the ocean. This is how I feel about the world much of the time, when I am not feeling too far gone. Things are how they're supposed to be, mostly. All evidence to the contrary. Life swims, lumbers across the sand, rests, lumbers, swims, rests. I lay there on the bench immobilized. If I were a monk seal, I could have waddled up into a sitting position, slid off the bench, and pulled myself by my flippers back into the ocean. Rory once saw a mother monk seal teaching her puppy how to rest by swimming up onto the sand for a while before slipping back into the waves. The two of them practiced over and over, then disappeared into the water. Remembering this made me miss Sam terribly. I felt discarded, and I needed for time to pass more quickly. I would be fine with all of life's contractions if they would simply pass when I am ready for them. so I can be okay again and remember what, after all, I'm doing in labor. Being human can be so dispiriting. It is a real stretch for me a lot of the time. I put my nose to a crack in the wall so I could smell the pine. I couldn't wait any longer for the ski patrol woman. Where was she? She'd said she was my only real friend and I was such a mess. Her voice was gentle and kind. The psalmist wrote, "Oh, that today you would hearken to his voice and harden not your hearts." Okay, fine, I said to God, and then noticed that I was much less of a mess than I'd been earlier. This is a lot. I could have sat up, but I wanted the ski patrol person to see the full extent of my suffering. If she ever, in fact, returned. I thought of the people I know from church and political circles who are doing a kind of psychic ski patrol in the world, noticing when people are in trouble, refusing to look away, offering an ear and their own warm gloves to wear. 20 minutes later, my ski patrol woman did come back, rubbing her bare hands together. "How are you doing?" she asked. At first, the enthusiasm in her voice worried me because she sounded as if we might now move on to calisthenics. Then I could tell that she knew I was fine, better, rested. I was peaceful. She was my own private pool worker, my own mother seal. I sat up and breathed in the fresh air from the open door. She gave me another Dixie cup of water, and I hoisted this one Germanically. She walked over to the heater and checked my gloves. "They're all ready to wear again if you'll give me mine back." I stood up. I felt like my old self, which is to say creaky but okay. "I would take the chair down," she said, "unless you really, really want to ski." I really wanted to ski. I'd already had one great run down this slope. She made a huge fuss over me when I left, as if I'd been in an avalanche. I pulled on my gloves and headed out onto the huge white ocean of ice. I glided and fell and got back up and skied little by little, the very best I could, all the way back down the mountain. So that is pretty much every single thing I know about God and grace. My experience with grace is that almost all the time it involves water. It involves someone bringing you a glass of water. It involves you bringing someone a glass of water. There's a story in here about how it sometimes feels like water wings, like when you're a kid and you're in danger of slipping under for a minute or longer. Sometimes it's a silence that comes over you when you seriously want to share your tiny opinion with someone and you don't, and instead you breathe for a minute and you hold back what you were going to say. You buy a little time. Sometimes grace has bought time. The great Eugene O'Neill said that the man is born broken and the grace of God is glue, and I think that's true. I imagine grace sometimes when I'm just lost and I feel like a mother or a grandmother has done some really, really quick basting for me right before I have to step back into the world to keep my hem from coming undone. Grace always meets you exactly where you are. That to me is the most amazing thing, is that it's a come-as-you-are party, and that it meets you where you are and then it doesn't leave you where it found you. And when you look back at where it found you, you know you couldn't have gotten from where you were to where you've ended up. So it's funny, sometimes I talk to people about writing, and sometimes I talk to them about my walk of faith. And it's really, I can grab the exact same notes, because what applies to one applies to the other. I don't even know which one this batch is, but it's fine. I don't really even need them. But everything involving writing and your artistic, creative bigger, truer self, and being a pilgrim, being a seeker of faith, a seeker of God, seeker of goodness, seeker of truth. All of it has to do with passing through darkness and coming out somehow to a point where you can see a little bit more light. At our church, we sing this song I really love. I think it's called The Other Side of Coming Through. Because if you're like me, it's so amazing when you come through. It's so great to come through, but the coming through can be very scary and painful. You can feel like you're on your elbows, pulling yourself through a tunnel. And so grace often feels like someone calling down to you. It's not that much farther. I got you some water. Just keep going. It's like somebody on the English Channel in a boat beside you, because on these big things, these big ticket items of life, like raising children and having parents who get old, or people that you can't live without who get sick and whose death you couldn't survive and yet they die, you're going to be in the English Channel. God doesn't have a magic wand, which I hate. To me, if I were God, or God's West Coast assistant, I would have a completely different system. I would speak out loud or use email. But it doesn't work. You're in the water. You're in the water, and it's often very cold, and things bump up against you, and you don't know what you are, but you know it's probably not good. And grace is that somebody is actually always, even if you don't notice it, in the boat beside you. And they have warm tea, and they have petroleum jelly to put on your hands and neck and face so the jellyfish don't bite. If you struggle with grace, I just saw this thing the other day I think it was on the CNN website, and it said that 40% of Americans have left the church of their childhood. Isn't that really interesting? And 1 in 10 people are lapsed Catholics. That's a lot of Americans. And a lot of people that come to my readings are people who had faith as children. I think it's a natural attribute of children to have some sort of faith that something's listening when they pray, something's keeping them company. A lot of the people that come to my readings have lost that faith because it was so scary to be children in their families. And they associate being children in their families with the religious teaching that went along with that. And it so often had to do with what a real disappointment you were turning out to be, and how narrow the path to God was, how exclusive. And it really wasn't at this point looking good for you. A lot of us, I was what was called in the 50s and early 60s, there was a term for children like me. It was called overly sensitive. And now I call myself clinically sensitive because I think it makes me sound braver. But I know a lot of you that are here were probably labeled overly sensitive, because what it meant was you were paying attention. It meant that when you went to the pound, you noticed that there were still 25 dogs behind when you found the new family puppy, and that it's awful, and you're not stupid, and you know what's going to happen. You've heard. Or my parents were real political activists, and there might be a book on India around, and there'd be pictures of children in it, and they didn't weigh any pounds at all, and they were dusty, and their eyes were kind of roomy and, wet, and there were flies around. And you got it if you were paying attention. And I wasn't hysterical, but you know what? my heart was really open. I just had this big, open heart. And I got teased a lot. I was a strange and a tiny little, very, very, very thin child with this crazy blonde nimbus of hair. And people didn't know what race I was, but they did know I was a woman and a female, and that meant I could be teased. And I could be, my brother's friends and boys I didn't know would drive by and shout stuff to me about my frizzy hair. I now call them drive-by shoutings. But you know, it's bad enough if you look like a nice white American child with smooth, silky hair and you look like the ads. And so if you don't and people are shouting at you, if you were someone who was getting bullied, it's pretty scary to keep believing that you're safe and that someone is hearing you and grieving with you and being there for you in the dark. But I did. Let's tell you, my pastor, Veronica Goins, told this story once of a girl, a little girl in bed, and I was scared to death of the dark till I was about 12, and everyone really teased me. And I felt scared and sad, and when I brought this up, my parents, who were very hip, loving people, would say, "Oh, Annie, now what?" Because this was before the women's movement. This is before the gay movement. This is before liberation theology. This is after civil rights. My parents were very involved in civil rights, and yet they had a child who was overwhelmed by what I saw. And the first thing they tried to do, there's a lot of drinking going on, they tried to convince me that what I saw wasn't actually happening. And I know a lot of you who had parents who liked to drink grew up having things explained to you that had to do with how happy mom and dad actually were together and how what you've seen is not what had happened. Of course, it was easy to think this. And so what was robbed from me was, first of all, the fact that I was just delightful, because I didn't get that. And what was robbed from me was my sense that what I saw was there, that I was a reliable narrator and witness to my own life. That's what so much of my work has been about as a writer and as a woman and as a Christian, is to reclaim my autonomy and my ability to trust what I see and hear and experience as being reliable. And I'm able to trust that when I'm really angry, there's an excellent reason for it, and if I don't get it out, it's going to make my mind bad. And I think I say every time I speak, if you're a female over 12 years old in America and you're not angry, you have just completely missed the boat. So I have learned to do all these things I was told not to do. I learned to cry, I learned to grieve, I learned to be angry. I learned that I was a trustworthy person, and that was very, very important. Oh, I started to tell you this story about being afraid of the dark. But Veronica's story is about a little girl, and it's dark, and she's scared, and she calls her mom, and her mom comes in, and the girl, "I'm just so afraid." And the mom says, "Don't worry, Jesus is here in this room with you now. You don't have to be afraid." And this happens 3 or 4 times, and finally the girl calls her mother again, "Please come in here," and the mother comes in, and she says it again. She said, "Honey, God is right here with you, on the bed, beside the bed, here with you. You don't have to be afraid." And the little girl said, "I need someone with skin on." And that in one sentence is who I think we are called to be as Christians, as believers. And I don't mean to leave anybody out. Whatever your faith walk is, to me, it's you're in. I mean, it's just, I don't have literally any differentiation or opinion. I've never once in my life tried to convert anybody. I won't start tonight. I think it must be very, very hard not to be walking with your spiritual truth as part of your walk, because I would have given up a long time ago if I thought I was what the world always said I was when I was younger. If I believed in the world's values, I would have given up a long time ago. The world tells you it's out there, and you can go out there and lasso it. And you can charge it, buy it, lease it, rent it, date it, own it, upgrade it, remodel it, and then you'll be okay. And you won't be. You'll be worse than you already were. The God-shaped holes inside of you will be bigger. The holes of breath, that it can only be filled by breath, or what in the Christian tradition we would call the Holy Spirit. So in the Buddhist tradition they would call breath. So I really need someone with skin on, a lot. And that's who I've tried to be in the world, is someone with skin on. And as a writer, I have tried to be somebody who can say, this is what it's like for me. And when I had an infant, I just, like 24/7, didn't love it. Like every so often I felt that it was a little bit of a mixed grill. And if you look in the books, and especially 18 and a half years ago when my son was born, none of them mention that it's a mixed grill. And that just every so often, if you're with a baby all the time, you might every so often just feel a tiny, tiny, tiny bit tense. Or bored. Or enraged. And I haven't actually taught teaching for a long time, but when I did, I used to say, write what you'd love to come upon, because it's such a blessing when someone will tell me the truth. And ideally, I love it when they make it funny. I always said, I think I wrote in the last book, that laughter is carbonated holiness. But when I tell the truth, if I sat down and told you the truth, I absolutely believe, no matter who you are, what age, what race, what denomination, or whether you're atheist, whatever, if I told you my truth, I think you would start to laugh and you'd say, you know what, me too. And I think if you told me more yours, I would go, oh my God, that is so funny. I know exactly what you mean. Because when we are really struggling to be in the truth of our spiritual identity, then we're all pretty much alike. We're all in the same boat. We're all a little nuts. Some days go better than others. Some days are just way too long, and there's no getting around it. You just have to kind of ride them out. Things will pass. And so what I've tried to do is to write my truth as honestly as I can. And of course I make up stuff sometimes, and I change people's identity if I think they'll be angry or recognize themselves. Just try to tell the truth, because who was it? Maya Angelou said, the function of freedom is to free someone else. Like the point of whether you're a Jewish or a Christian or an atheist involved in social justice issues or whatever, the point isn't to get it, like pull up the ladder, I got mine. The point is that you give it away. The function of freedom is to free someone else. The hunger we feel is not for more. A lot of us have an addiction called more, just a little more. If I just had a little bit more, I'm going to do it one more time. I'm definitely going to stop, though, tomorrow. I just need a little more now. So it's a disease called more, and the secret is that we're not hungry for more, we're hungry for what we're not giving. And so in the writing, I don't write anything, and you don't know anything about me that I don't want you to know, that I don't know, that I'm not pretty sure is universal. And I'm writing what I love to come upon. And I want to say this, and I'm not going to name names, but sometimes during certain administrations, you feel literally like you could lose your mind. And I know what that feels like. You feel like you could literally go crazy. And I wrote a piece in this book about, I'll just name one tiny name, but in Plan B, I was so angry during the build-up to war and during the war. And when I would think about Dick Cheney, I would feel literally like I was losing my mind. And but I have learned that we're hungry for what we're not giving. And so I went up to the altar, which you're invited to do every week if you have special problems. And I said, I just can't do this. I'm so angry. I'm apoplectic. I feel like I might lose my mind. I feel like I could have a nervous breakdown. It's about 2003. And my pastor didn't say, well, you know what, get over it. Or, well, then I can't help you. Or, what are you willing to give up? She said, I'm just so glad you've told us that. And just come up here. And everyone would pray for me like I was a perfectly lovable, decent human, which I didn't feel like, because I felt like I felt kind of murderous sometimes. And you know what? It was lifted because I just gave it away. I gave it to my church, and they said, we're glad you told us, and we love you exactly the same. And I learned and I remembered a little bit every day until it was lifted, the most bizarre, mysterious, paradoxical truth, as I understand it, which is that God loves Dick Cheney exactly as much as God loves my 4-year-old niece, Clara. Because God loves, period. That's the whole sentence. God loves. My belief came to be that God welcomes Dick Cheney or Slobodan Milosevic or any war criminal, and I mean that in a loving way, into heaven, that everybody gets in, and God says, you are my child too, Slob, but you have left quite a mess, and we need to get that cleaned up. And God has skills and resources and patience and helps you get it cleaned up. God loves me. It's the most amazing thing on earth. The same way he loves Donald Rumsfeld. Because God loves, period. It's such a trip. I kind of feel angry about that. I feel like it's not really fair. But anyway, let's move on. So I'll just tell you what I know, the tools that are in the crummy little battered toolbox of writing, and by writing I mean any kind of creative endeavor. Singing, joining the choir, painting, drawing, dancing, anything. The tools are small and battered, and they don't look like they will be enough, but I promise you they are. The first thing that we need to know and to reach for is the truth that maybe your parents forgot to mention or the culture forgot to mention inadvertently, but you know plenty. You know enough. You get to start where you are. Everything you need to know is inside you. There's no one to look up to. There's sure no one to bow down to. There's no one to try to sneak the answer out of you. You have it. And you get to find it. That's the journey we're on, is you get to find it one day at a time. And the great novelist E.L. Doctorow, who wrote Ragtime most famously, but also everything he's written is beautiful. He's a wonderful writer. He said, writing is like driving at night with the headlights on. You can only see a little ways in front of you, but you can make the whole journey that way. And that's so wild to me, because it's so contrary to everything I know I've experienced or want. It's mostly contrary to what I want. I like to know where I'm going. I like to know what it's going to be like when I get there. I don't like surprises, ever. I'm extremely nervous about the cords running between the fifth pew from one side to another. And I cannot imagine why those are there. And it's hard for me to think about anything else, really. I don't like, I'm a frightened and spaced out person. I was a frightened and spaced out 5-year-old. I'm a frightened and sometimes mostly, sometimes frightened, always spaced out 53-year-old. I'm postmenopausal. I had been hoping menopause would bring clarity and focus. But I know enough. And I'm in the middle of my 12th book. And you would think by now that I would have internalized this idea, that I know enough that it's in me, it's not out there. And I never sit down and go, wow, this is great. You've had a good career, and I think this won't be that different than the other ones. Let's get started. I have never had that experience one day of the 33 years I've been writing full time. Never. I sit down, I get up. I sit down, I get up. I want to know more. I want to know how the story ends. But I haven't even gotten to page 3 yet. I haven't even actually gotten to page 1. And I'm worried sick about how the meanest human on earth, Michiko Kakutani, is going to review it. And I'm literally on page 1. I hope she's not here tonight. I mean no offense. And so what you do is you kind of reel yourself back, and you remember. My book on writing, the Angry Writing book, the title is Bird by Bird, because in California, when you're in 4th grade, I don't know why this is true, but for the first semester you study California history, you study the Native Americans and the Spanish missions and the gold rush and you go up to Sacramento. It's just like immersion in California. And for your second semester, you study birds. And you have to write. No, it's the first semester you study birds because it's the first paper you ever write. Because you don't have to. Back then, you didn't write a paper in 3rd grade because you're just sort of figuring out cursive writing. So it's your first paper, and it matters. And it's breathing down your neck the entire semester. And I had a brother. I was always really good at school because I was cursed with perfectionism. And if there's a devil, it is definitely somehow. Perfectionism is definitely part of the dark side because it is the oppressor. And more than anything else that you could begin to pray to have lifted from you, boy, I would pray like just a teaspoon here, a teaspoon there of the perfectionism. I grew up thinking you're on a tightrope walk, you better do it right. You're going to fall off. The family's going to look bad. You're going to hurt. You're going to fall, tumble down. Turns out when I got into recovery in my early 30s, you discover the tightrope is like 18 inches down. You fall down. Somebody comes over and says, "Can I give you a hand?" You get up. I didn't know that, and my brother didn't know that, either of my brothers. And so he had all these books on birds, and he had National Geographics to cut out for illustrations, and he had good drawing paper and colored pencils, which is what we used back then. And he couldn't start, and he started crying. We were in this one-room cabin we had, and my dad sat down with him, and he said, "Just take it bird by bird, so that you read about pelicans for 15 minutes. Then you write about pelicans in your own words, and then you go through the National Geographic, and you find some pictures, or you draw a pelican. Then you study house finches for 10 or 15 minutes. Pretty soon, you get a rhythm going. You nail it. So the first thing I know is that you know enough, and you just take tiny little pieces of it, and it's enough. The second thing, second most important thing you can do is just stop what you're doing. I should probably make that the first thing, but you just stop, and you look around, and you notice what a crazy trajectory you find yourself on too often, that you're trying to get too much done. Once I was giving a lecture in San Francisco, and my son was only about 8 years old at the time, and I was running and going, "Come on, Sam, come on," trying to get there. And I had all these papers, and I had a couple books, and everything was just chaotic. I was shoving the papers back in. I was sort of uptight and all this, and come on, and dropping things. And I pick up. And Sam said, "You're carrying too much and you're going too fast." And up until the time I was about 40, that was always something that was true. I was carrying too much. And I was going too fast. And, when my friend Pammy died, who I've written so much about, she was 37, and this is about the time when I got it. Although it was later that Sam said it. We went out to shop. We went shopping at Macy's. It couldn't have been a month before she died, and she had a wig on, and she was in a wheelchair. And I got this little dress, and I usually don't wear little clothes at all, but I had this cute boyfriend. And I put on my cute, tight little dress, and I came out, and I said, "Does this make me look big in the hips?" And she said from her wheelchair, Annie, you really don't have that kind of time. And it has rung through the chambers of my mind ever since, whatever that's been, 16 years ago. You don't have that kind of time. And if you're going to be a writer, if you're going to start a church school, if you're going to become a dancer, if you're going to learn to have a relationship, if you're going to step into your parents' difficulties, if you're going to welcome a nephew of one of your brothers or sisters to come stay with you while you pray for grace and restoration in the family, you just got to stop and try to figure out some of stupid stuff you don't have to do that day. Because you really need to be able to be present. It's like, like in sweepstakes, you must be present to win. You must be present to experience the vital immediacy of this one precious life we've been given. You must be present, and yet it's so hard because our minds just trip, trip. Wait, okay, all right, this is what I'm like. When I sit down to write, I get up. I get great exercise. I sit down, I get up. I sit down, I get up. I sit down and go, oh, wait, I swear to God, there's no one there. Sam has moved out. I have animals who look at me, What? What do you swear to God? I swear to God, I just want to look at CNN for like 5 minutes. So I go in, no one's watching. I watch CNN for half hour, then I come back, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then I start to think, oh my God, I have to call. You always have to make the dentist appointment, right? You have to get the dental cleaning. And then as you get a little older, you hit like 45, then you need to get the periodontal cleaning in between the dental cleaning. And you have to do it that minute. It can't wait till later in the afternoon. And it just goes on. And I just see people, so many people are just being cursed by the ability to multitask now. And if there was anything I would just love for you to take away, is that is going to start to argue a wasted life. And when you turn 64 or 80, and you'd meant to be writing all this time, you'd meant to be in the choir, which meant getting out Tuesday nights, you'd meant to start being there for the people in the convalescent home because you're good at it and they love you, it's going to break your heart. I don't think you're going to go, God, I just feel I'm 80 and I'm just so glad that I always kept my car a little bit cleaner than the other neighbors, You're not going to want that stuff. You're going to go, God, I wish I had sung more with people. To me, that's the greatest thing on earth, and I don't have a good voice. But to singing with people, I grew up singing with people. We always sang at our house. We sing in church, and singing with people means that the sound, the voice, and the silence is big enough to carry all your mistakes and all your spacing out and all your missed notes and stuff. It's heaven. To be present while you're singing with people literally is heaven. Maybe you can get that way cleaning the car. Maybe you can. But I think if you found out that you had a limited amount of time to live, you get it. If somebody said to you, you have 2 years, and I'm sorry, and we can keep you comfortable, I don't think that you would have the same priorities necessarily that you have now. I think you would start to realize that a lot of the stuff that was in your airplane was keeping you flying way too low, and you just wanted to fly, and you would just start chucking stuff out. But you got to stop to do that. You got to stop, you got to get a grip and go, what am I doing? Why am I here? What do I love? I think a lot of us kept moving so quickly all those years because we were scared when we were children, and we felt like we were always about one step ahead of the abyss, and if we stopped, we'd fall into the abyss. And you know what? I think it was true. And a lot of us, and I know a lot of people here, fell into the abyss at some point. St. John, is it St. John the Divine who calls it the dark night of the soul? And a lot of us know what that means. We've survived an unsurvivable loss. We have crashed and burned behind our addictions. We've lost everything. And we've lost that connectedness to ourselves. And the culture would say, Okay, so you're in the abyss. Let's freshen it up. Let's trick it out a little bit. I know. We'll go to IKEA and get a cute rug. And then we'll have a cute rug in the abyss. And, but you know, the culture lies about just about everything. Just about everything. If the culture's told you it, thank it for sharing. It's a lie. And the abyss is where, for most of us, our lives began anew. Because when we were in the abyss and we finally stopped, we were finally confronted with the consequences of our choices and our toxic thinking, and we sat there, someone came along. And someone came along, and what they said, if you're sober, is, I've got a minute, can I come down and join you? That's what Jesus says. Jesus says, let me come sit with you. I'm happy in the abyss. I'm happy, whatever's fine. Do you want a hand up? You want me to come down there? Let me come down there. You seem funny, you know? And to be in that stillness, in that silence, and to have run out of good ideas is where life has begun for most of us. So it has to do with a kind of spiritual nautilus, where when you feel the stillness and the silence, you don't turn the blender to frappe because you're afraid of that mysterious nowness, you know? You're afraid of who that really is, that deep, 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 deep and abiding witness who has been inside of you since you arrived here. And so it's so amazing if you can learn to tolerate being a human being and just being. And if you notice that you start to cry, good. Cry forever if you feel like it. The culture will tell you that there's sort of a system in place, some sort of calculus for grief. And the calculus is that if you've lost a best friend, 3 months. You should kind of be back on your feet by 3 months, I think. You lose a sibling, 6 months. You lose a spouse, a year. And by then, you need to get up and you need to, right? You've just seen this a million times. People trying to goad people into getting back into the stream of things. And it's just obscene to do that to people. It's so awful. When you lose someone, I mean, I don't know how we started thinking you're supposed to get over that or that you necessarily will. I think some deaths you don't get over, and you're not supposed to. And given the choice, you wouldn't want to. You'll have this painful, painful chamber in your heart because in it, this person is just so alive and accessible that you'll pay, and the price will be high. But I just say it's the way home. You know, I really believe tears and anger, especially for women who've been so goaded into withholding their anger, threatened. You know, the tears will water you and they'll bathe you. We always have this little ceremony at our church where Veronica gives you these little clear pebbles that you can get in big bags. It might be aquamarine, and she splashes you from the baptismal font and gives you one of these stones to carry and says, "Remember your baptism." And we just do the water on the head, but however you do it, when you go before the water, you're one person, and after the water, you're not. You're a new person. It says, remember your baptism, and the tears can give you that, and they hydrate you, and they water the ground at your feet. Who knows what might be getting itself ready to sprout? So don't buy into it. One of the last things I want to say, we have to get on to questions. Okay, I'm all over this. I'll just do this one last thing, maybe. Maybe I will. The third thing is that we grow up being really afraid to make these messes and mistakes and to fail. And if you're a writer, it's awful to make a false start and to work on a novel for a year and for it to turn out not to be something you're going to pursue into publication. But it's back to that perfectionism, being the voice of the oppressor. If you want to be a good artist, if you want to be a good mystic, if you want to be a good Sunday school teacher, If you want to be a good parent, fail more. You know, Beckett said it so beautifully, Samuel Beckett, but I won't remember exactly what he said. He said, try, fail, try again, fail again, try again, fail better. You know, it is so amazing to let yourself learn to not be good. If you're going to be a writer, if you've been a writer, waste more space, waste more time, print out more, print out all the time. Send money to the Sierra Club to pay for the trees. Writing is not about the computer. Writing is about paper, like reading is. And for a lot of us, and I know for teachers and librarians, you know it's a sacred sound. The sound of your fingers or your pencil, best of all, on a page. Or in the night when other people might feel alone, you're in a whole world that someone has created, that you have surrendered, you've let yourself down, you've let down into it, and you've gotten really lost in this creation. And in getting lost, you're finding yourself a little bit found. But waste more time, stare off into space. There's a wonderful bumper sticker. Almost everything I know can be reduced to bumper stickers. But there's one I saw that says, ships are safe in port, but this is not what ships were built to do. And it's so scary to be bad at stuff. If you're our age, if you're my age, in your 50s, probably even younger, you basically do stuff you're good at, right? Because you're not stupid. So if you're really poor at something and it makes you feel like you're a loser, you think, you know what? I don't think so. And so you mostly keep doing stuff you're pretty good at, or maybe taking another challenge and moving up the scale of difficulty. But I just want to tell you really quickly, I can do it in 3 minutes. My boyfriend Rory and I have started taking dance class 8 months ago. And if I wrote another book on writing, it would secretly be about dancing, because it has been so illuminating and painful. And we're both very athletic, and we both athletically do things we've been good at for 50 years now, right, or 40 years. And so we both went to do ballroom dancing. We thought it'd be fun. Sometimes people have parties or a wedding or something, and the coolest people get up and they dance. So we went to, and he got me classes, mostly group, 2 private, for a Christmas present. Then he broke his ankle, I think, to get out of the dance class. And so we didn't actually start till June. And we went and we got to have 2 private lessons with the single gayest man I have ever met in my life. His name is Freddie. And it's like if there's a God, I think he either looks like Freddie or Isaac Stern. And Freddie is the safest person I know, and he's gorgeous, gorgeous. Oh. So for the first week, all we're going to do is we're going to work on foxtrot. And all we're going to do with a foxtrot is learn the basic step, which is slow, slow, quick, quick. There's kind of a catch-up step. So I'll show you. You go slow, slow, quick, quick. Slow, slow, quick, quick. Slow, slow. And we couldn't do it. We could not, for the life of us, do it. We could not do it. It was like patting yourself on the head and rubbing your stomach. And we'd go, we'd get it, and then one of us would make a mistake, or he'd step on me, and then I'd be really mad, and I think, this is a bad boyfriend. This is a bad relationship. Or else he'd say, you're supposed to lead. I'm supposed to be leading you. I'm the man, you're supposed to follow. And I can't tell you what hearing that does to me. And I would just think, men are pigs, and I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to stoop to this level. But it's really true that someone has to lead, and traditionally they teach the man. And for about 3 weeks, we did slow, slow, quick, quick. And the 37 bad voices in you are going, how can this get us out on the dance floor? We would hurt other dancers. Freddie would go between us and other dancers so that we wouldn't step on them or crash into them. And little by little, we kept going. You know, it's before I turned on Woody Allen, which I have entirely. He used to say that 80% of life was just showing up. And it's really the secret of everything. You got to show up. You got to fail. You got to make mistakes. You got to be bad. You just show up. Of course, you don't know what to do in a crisis or a tragedy. Get someone a glass of water. It's almost always what is needed. And of course I don't know how to dance. How am I going to know how to dance? I never danced in my life. I can do this kind of Bellina's hippie two-step, take LSD and go crazy Janis Joplin thing. So slow, slow, quick, slow, slow. And I can tell you now, 9 months, 8 months later, I can do foxtrot, I can do the waltz, I can do the East Coast swing, which is pretty easy. I can do the West Coast swing, which is really hard. I can do the merengue, I can do the rumba, I can do the cha-cha. And the thing is, I do them all badly. All 7 dances, we do pretty badly. We're bad dancers, but we are happy dancers, and we are so proud of ourselves. And we don't hurt people anymore. And the thing is, we never, ever miss class unless I'm on the road. And all it was trust and surrender. It was slow, slow, quick. Mastering that. And then he'd say, okay, now, arms, you know, slow, slow, quick. And then he'd say very gently, maybe at some point you're going to need to turn. It literally had not crossed our mind. And we learned to turn. So it's slow, slow, quick. Okay, I will stop. And Kate, why don't you come up and we'll do some questions. Okay, great.